Hey there, I'm Lee Ullman here with some big news from the National Young Farmers Coalition. We're partnering with Heritage Radio Network on a special season of The Farm Report. It's all about what's happening with the Farm Bill and how it impacts farmers and eaters.
I am growing diversified vegetables on land that's been in our family for 150 years.
And so with the pandemic, gentrification, property values going up, we had to sell the land and we lost it.
Join us as we uncover the untold stories behind this massive piece of legislation that shapes how we grow our food, what we eat, and so much more.
The problems we have had, those are things that come from earlier Farm Bill and USDA policy, right? Like Earl Butz, get big or get out.
You know, it's my responsibility to know not only what I'm eating, but then like how that all came to be. And realize like, wow, like this piece of legislation, all this money, like it's technically something that I support as a taxpayer.
While Congress debates the next Farm Bill, this is not just an invitation to listen. It's a call to action. Be part of the conversation. Subscribe to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network, wherever you listen to podcasts.
This episode is brought to you by Verterra Dinnerware. Learn more at verterra.com. That's VERTERRA.com.
This week on Meat and Three, we bring you stories about how Gen Z is different from their millennial predecessors through the lens of food.
My knowledge of alcohol didn't really come from like Bud Light commercials or like Project X.
Yeah, and that's my gripe with the platform as well, is that all these DIY videos, cooking videos, they're 20 seconds.
What's one food item from your childhood that you wish you could have today?
Dunkaroos, because they don't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. Although, the Dunkaroos Twitter was activated again a year ago, so it's only a matter of time. They've tweeted a couple times. It's pretty hype.
Listen to Meat and Three, HRN's food news and storytelling roundup wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, hello. Welcome to All in the Industry on Heritage Radio Network. I'm your host, Shari Bayer, and it is Wednesday, August 12th, 2020. This is the 261st episode of this series, which is dedicated to behind-the-scenes talent in the hospitality industry. Today, we have a special episode from H.O.S.T Summit Plus Social, our first all-day conference for and about our dynamic hospitality industry that took place on Monday, January 27th, 2020 at the William Vale in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. H.O.S.T, which stands for Hospitality, Operations, Services, and Technology, featured top culinary and hospitality leaders who have all been past guests on this show. And they were featured in informative panel discussions and one-on-one interviews, creating a forum for the exchange of ideas and innovation. Over 250 hospitality professionals joined us for our full day of programming, which included networking opportunities with fabulous food and drinks. Our overall theme was All In, which carried throughout the day, from my keynote address to our curated lunch conversations. Now, this show today is going to be longer than our usual ones, so you can stay tuned for that. It's going to include 4 of our different panel conversations from the conference's morning session. And then our next show is going to have all of the content from our afternoon session. So, that's what's coming up. I realize now that a lot has changed in our industry and the world since we hosted H.O.S.T due to COVID-19 and the tremendous impact that it has had on the restaurants that we all love and our entire hospitality space. And I've been covering it here on our show and talking with my guests for the past couple months. And I know these conversations we've been having have been very important, and they've shifted from our conversations that we had at H.O.S.T back in January as we're navigating through this current landscape. I do hope, and I think you will still find the content that we have from H.O.S.T and the conversations that were had to be inspiring and valuable in moving forward through this unprecedented time. And so I'm very glad that I can share what we did discuss with you today and with my show next week. So today's episode is going to feature the following topics and panelists. First off, the making of a deal, a real estate approach to hospitality. The panelists, Keith Durst, principal and founder of FOC, and he was my guest on episode 50. Grace Ann Jordan, Hospitality Partnerships and Investments, Milstein Companies, episode 26. Jasmine Moy, founder of Jasmine Moy Law PC, episode 224. And this was moderated by Kathleen Squires, food and travel writer, columnist, The Wall Street Journal, co-producer, The James Beard, America's First Foodie, episode 44. Following that, we have Restaurants and Risks, an Industry Perspective. The panelists, J.J. Johnson, chef and founder of Field Trip, episode 130. Didier Elena, executive director of Food Quality and Culture of Hog Salt Hospitality, episode 53. Allison Arth, founder and principal of Salt and Row, episode 209. And this was moderated by Jeff Gordonere, food and drinks editor of Esquire, episodes 198 and 223. Following that, we have a panel entitled Changing Neighborhoods, Changing Needs, Brooklyn and Beyond. And this included Alice Chang, founder and CEO of Culinary Agents, episode 59. Sean Feeney, co-founder Grove House and owner of Lilia and Missy, episode 223. Brandon Hoy, co-owner of Roberta's, episode 184, moderated by Maria Elena Martinez, founder of Meats NYC and the co-founder of New Worlder, episode 103. And then we close up this show with my talk with Drew Nieporent, and this was entitled Past, Present, and Future of Restaurants, Lessons from a Legendary Restaurateur. And again, this was me, founder of Bayer Public Relations, host of this show, All in the Industry, and the producer of this show, and the founder of H.O.S.T Summit Plus Social. And I am speaking with, Drew Nieporent, the founder of Myriad Restaurant Group. He was my guest on episode 176. So, I hope you enjoy what's to come, and thanks for listening. Here's H.O.S.T.
Good morning. Good morning, attendees. Good morning. Welcome to the inaugural H.O.S.T Summit and Social, bringing to life behind-the-scenes hospitality. And now, please welcome to the stage your host, the founder of Bayer Public Relations and host and producer of All in the Industry, Shari Bayer.
Well, hello. Welcome to H.O.S.T Summit Plus Social. I'm your host, Shari Bayer, and we're coming to you live from the William Vale in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, New York City. It is Monday, January 27th, 2020. This is our very first summit, inspired by my All in the Industry show on Heritage Radio Network, which launched in 2014 and now includes 239 episodes available in our archives, all dedicated to behind-the-scenes talent in the hospitality industry. Today we are bringing my show to life in a live format with H.O.S.T, Hospitality, Operations, Services, and Technology. In a moment, we will introduce our first panel, followed by more industry discussions, one-on-one conversations, and our special lunches and closing reception. But first, as I do at every summit, starting today, I am going to tip off H.O.S.T with my PR tip of the day. So today's tip is to have gratitude. And not only have gratitude, but express it often and with sincerity and volume. Let people know what you think about their efforts and how much you value them as friends, colleagues, employers, employees, vendors, family, and more. Know that we can never say thank you enough or tell one another how much we appreciate them. There could be no such overuse of the words thank you. I say impossible. So be humble and always give credit where credit is due, as appreciation is not just a tip, it's a way of life. That's my tip today. Now, on that note, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to so many people who have helped make today go from a vision to a reality. First, all of you, for being here, believing in H.O.S.T and what we're doing. Without you, there's no reason to be on a stage or buy a fun on-air sign and be the host. So thank you all. Next, my team, thank you all from the bottom of my heart. This soloist needed you and greatly appreciates you beyond words. Thanks to our incredible speakers, all 25 of them who are past guests on my show and true leaders in our industry. I'm so grateful for your participation and can't wait to hear you speak today. To our wonderful partners who came on board to support us our first year, we are very grateful. Thanks to our host venue, the William Vale, our media partner, Heritage Radio Network, Balter Sales Company, Cuisinart, Open Table, and Woodford Reserve. To our breakfast partners for kicking off today's delicious morning, Bread's Bakery, Ora King Salmon, Dew's Donuts and Coffee, Aficionado Coffee Roasters, San Pellegrino, and Aquapana. Now there's more things to come, more people made today happen, but let's get on with this show. Without further ado, let's go all in with H.O.S.T 2020.
Keith wanted to do like a Blues Brothers style entrance, but I haven't done a back handspring in a long time, so.
I said Ronnie would do it for her, though.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you so much, Shari, for organizing this amazing conference. I am very excited about this panel, the making of a deal, because I really know nothing about making deals, and I'm with three people who know everything about successful restaurant partnerships. Keith Durst is the founder of FOC, which stands for Friend of Chef. He's the founder and principal of it. He curates hospitality concepts all over the world, and he marries real estate, hospitality, and everything necessary for a successful partnership. One thing that you don't know about Keith is that he's also a great neighbor. Grace Ann Jordan. Grace Ann combines years of management expertise. She's worked with every big name in the business: Tom Colicchio, Jean-Georges Van Gerichten, Union Square Hospitality Group, and with one thing that you might not know about Grace is that she also has a background in psychology, which comes in really handy for management. And then Jasmine Moy is an attorney, and she specializes in putting together food and beverage negotiations. And she is also a wonderful author and writer. So thank you guys all for being here. First, why don't we start with you all telling us what it is that you do. What is your role in making of a restaurant deal? We'll start with Keith. What has to happen for someone to say, get me Keith Durst?
Okay, Ronnie. So what we do at FOC and what our team does is we tend to work mostly with developers, real estate developers, and great restaurant groups. Mostly here in New York, as far as the restaurant groups are based, but now all over the country and some parts of Europe as well. And what we really do is we have the ability to help developers make their real estate more valuable through the use of hospitality, experiential retail, different sources of ways of making changes that people can say, okay, I have a space, I have 10, 15, 20,000 square feet of retail space or ground floor space or basement space in a building that's 600,000 square feet or 1 million square feet. And we're going to use that 10 or 20,000 square feet of space to make the 1 million square feet more valuable. And that's really what my group does.
Grace Ann.
Hi, good morning. Where I come in is probably the other side of Keith, is I work more with operators and chefs. A lot of people that I've worked with in my time in operations, and try to put together relationships that I feel will work really well based on vision and how people kind of have moved through their career. I also work with a real estate and banking family here in New York, helping them curate these experiences in their buildings, where we're building amenities and looking for chefs and third-party businesses that can come in and make, much like what Keith said, the real estate more valuable for per square footage.
And Jasmine.
Very similar to Keith and Grace Ann. Essentially, once the partnership is found, or once the developers and the operators have found each other, all of that needs to be papered in a way that makes sense and that protects everybody in the ways that matter. So all of my work is in just documenting and making sure that all the contracts are buttoned up the way that they should be to set everyone up for success.
So now that you've told me what you officially do, why don't you tell me what you do that people don't realize that you do? What do you do kind of behind the scenes that nobody even realizes? Grace Ann, we'll start with you. You mentioned some interesting things to me last night about, I said, I didn't really know that was in your job description.
Yeah, I think having a hospitality approach to these real estate projects is really important. I find, and Keith will tell you as well, that people are figuring out that we want to feel good in the spaces we're in, and the experiences are so important. And we're starting to think about everything from, walking into this room, how does it feel for someone to get into the center row when you have 9 chairs across? How does it feel to walk into a building and have to have your driver's license out and sign in with security? How do we take those pain points and make them more comfortable for entering the building? And in these real estate projects, you want people to feel like, the whole hubbub of getting through New York, that once they get to their destination, that it's a bit of an oasis. They have maybe a nice aroma, they're hearing great music, and they just feel like they've arrived at a place that they can feel comfortable. And that's from everything of, not to disparage security guards, but when you see the man in the suit with the clipboard and the pen, it'd be so much more of a better experience if that person was perhaps wearing their own clothes, or smiling and asking how your day was, offering some help of where your destination may be that you're going, and kind of engaging each time you come into the building. So we're, looking at how many steps it takes you to come into the building, what it feels like to pull out your phone and use a QR code to enter instead of, having to kind of sign up on a clipboard. How does it feel to go through a turnstile? How fast are the elevators? All these things that are going to make you successful in your visit for the day.
Jasmine, what is not in your job description that you often find yourself doing?
I think generally speaking, and maybe I would be better off with a background like Grace Ann's, but I think these, it's emotional. It's emotional to get into these deals. It's emotional to have these conversations. All the parties are putting a lot at risk in terms of time and money. And, people are getting cold feet. People are stressed out about X, Y, or Z. You know, so there's a lot of, you know, me either saying, this actually doesn't feel good, and I'm not sure that this is right for you, or how do you feel? So a lot of sort of counseling folks about whether a very specific deal is the right one for them at this, you know, moment in their career. So yeah, a little counseling, I guess.
That's where the psychology comes in.
Yes, exactly. And Keith?
So I think what most people don't realize is we do a lot of things from ground up, from day one up, before things are even happening, where we're actually helping people lay spaces out, block patterns out, do all the financials, all the modeling, and then actually doing it from a development side, but then also having to jump around and do it from an operator side where they haven't really had experience working with bigger developers. They're used to working on one-off restaurants with small groups and things. They don't really understand the mechanics of working with a large company that has a whole host of departments and interdepartmental meetings and everything happening. So we really have to usher them through all that, and then while we're doing that, also keep things moving in somewhat of an organized fashion, and then really do a ton of matchmaking with different groups that we really like working with. So for us, it's a matter of knowing and understanding the groups that we like working with and hope that the developers and restaurateurs want to work with them too. We know their systems, and we try to get people to kind of play along and really try to usher it through together. And that's where all this stuff becomes so important, the agreements that are being drawn, and we're doing multiple pro formas and multiple models, one for an agreement, one for the bank, one to live by. And as you're doing all these things, like knowing that half of what gets into this agreement, at some point you just have to have people that are just willing to take some leap of faith and say, okay, we believe in who we're working with. So I heard it one time, and I think it's a motto of our company that you can't do a good deal with bad people and you can't do a bad deal with good people. And I think for us, we really spend a lot of time making sure the people we're working with are people we want to spend the next couple of years with.
So in keeping with the theme of today, what does the ultimate deal look like to each of you? What does it take for you to say, I'm all in? And we'll start with you, Jasmine.
Well, I'm in a slightly different position because I'm, you know, I'm the help. So, you know, if they're all in, I will be all in because they're paying me to be all in. And, you know, to the extent that there's a part of this that isn't exactly right, you know, it's me doing my best to communicate why, you know, toggling this way or adjusting this thing this way is actually better for both parties, especially, you know, Keith was talking in the hotel space in particular. You've got the building owner, you've got the hotel manager, you maybe have a brand involved. If the property, if there are mortgages on the property, you've got the bank involved, then you've got the food and beverage manager involved. So it's, you know, there's 6 or 7 people in the same sandbox. And just, you know, making sure that everything is calibrated in a way that makes sense and reduces friction. And, you know, although Keith said you can try to anticipate every single thing that might go wrong in any single kind of deal, you know, the addressing that as a 4,000-page document, that's not what they look like. So you do have to be able to work with people, be flexible and things like that as well, you know, once a contract is signed.
Keith, what does it take for you to say I'm all in?
Well, I think for us, it's a project that my team has to love everything we do because there's so much time and energy that's put into it. So we all have to kind of sit down as a team and get organized and look at it, and everyone has to get excited about it. And then we have to say as a team that we're willing to reinvest our fees and different things into that project. And if I look around and the team's not willing to do that, then I know it's not a project we should take. And we're kind of, what I've learned, and Jasmine probably won't like this very much, is, you know, we get these contracts for consulting contracts put in front of us all the time, and Grace Ann probably too, and I don't want to sign them. Like, they don't protect us at all. So for me, I could spend 3 months negotiating this and go through all this stuff, and then if one of my development partners that we're working with, if they don't want to pay us or they don't want us around anymore, what am I going to do? So for us, like, we do our best to make sure that we believe in the people we're working with, and we try to spend a month or so getting to know them a little bit before we actually even sign a deal with them, because then we're locked in. So we really have to kind of decide as a team, and then the whole group of us has to get excited about it, because it's just not one person. We all do different things, and everyone's really has an important role in what we do, and they have to get excited. They have to want to work with those people, and if they don't, then we just can't do it.
Grace Ann?
I feel like I'm the passionate person on this topic, and these two have to kind of keep me going towards the goal, because I'm the one that is, with the chef that's really excited about the food they're cooking, or they fall in love with a space, and then Jasmine saying it's not realistic, or Keith is saying that real estate deal isn't the right one. So for me to be all in, it's more about the relationships, and it's interesting. It's such a common thread that we've all been talking about, is how important the people part of this is, and the relationships with, not just the chef, but the person that they are, putting their trust in to operate and to partner with them, and the landlord relationship and what their plans are for the future. And when all those things align, and the principals decide that this is the right thing, it's just something intuitive that you just know. And I'm forever a cheerleader when all those things come together, and that's when I'm all in.
And you've spoken a lot about the people and relationships, but what about location, especially in a city like New York? How important is location, Keith?
Well, we think location is one of the, and it's the old real estate adage, but it's so important. And it's not just location. Rent and the construction of the rent deal is really what's critically important these days. When we're working with a developer, we have to explain to them what the capabilities of the tenant and the restaurant group are that we're also trying to help and put in the right space, how much they really can. And we're trying to curate almost all these things as a percentage of sales based on the caliber and the quality of the restaurant, or quick serve restaurant, or fine dining restaurant. And we try to come up with percentages, and then we try to mark them back up. And now we're really working off of lower base rents and not really thinking about things in terms of square footage, and all that goes with the right location can fix so many of these little issues as they come. And we're fortunate to work in some amazing locations around the city and around the country where we know the foot traffic and the people are there. And then that kind of allows us to have that base of knowing things are going to be great from the begin with. But then we've also worked with, and Grace Ann knows some of the people, and they're capable of bringing the traffic. And so for us, it's two different ways to look at it. And when someone's sitting on the best piece of real estate, we're going to make a deal one way with that operator, with that group. And when someone's sitting on not the best piece of real estate, it really gives our operators a leg up to really negotiate even a better deal.
So, Grace Ann, then, in terms of location, as Keith said, I think it's pretty interesting. Is there if you don't have the best location in the world, what are some of the things that you do to draw people there? How do you make a location a destination?
It's funny, I just thought of this. I feel like that terminology, destination restaurant, is just a big red flag, because there is so much that you have to bring, and it becomes a special occasion place. But I think having a restaurant that's for everyone, and I don't know why in my career this has happened, it's just kind of the way it went, but whether I was at Gramercy Tavern, there was a tavern that was walk-in, and there was a dining room that was reservations. And then I moved on to Jean-Georges, where there was the Nougatine, which is, more casual, and then the fine dining in the back. And then I went to the Modern, which had the bar room in the front and the dining room in the back, same thing, lighter and more accessible. And I just felt like those models, whether I gravitated those or not, it was more because you could welcome everyone. So when your crazy cousin who has never been to New York before doesn't want to sit in a fine dining restaurant and have a 3-hour experience, they felt much more comfortable coming to the front of the restaurant and having something more approachable food. So I think, these days, I can't tell you the last time that I made a reservation more than 2 days in advance. I never know what I'm doing. I think that having something where there's the ability for walk-in, there's the ability to do all the things, from everything from a private experience to just a drop-in, is the most successful, no matter where it is.
Grace Ann mentioned red flags, and Jasmine, what are some of the red flags that you come across that you say, this deal is just not going to work?
Yeah, Yeah, I think maybe a little unlike Keith and Grace Ann, I really truly began agnostic about the space, to the extent a client sees something and says, I felt something when I walked in, I think this is a space for me, or, especially I've got a lot of clients who, live in maybe underdeveloped parts of Brooklyn and are looking to do things there where maybe they would be one of the more, the first, recognizable or the first, Michelin rated restaurant maybe in that entire neighborhood. What I care about is more, when I look at the Department of Buildings website, are there a dozen open violations? If you're in the West Village, do you have a landmarked facade? Has it been built to code? How annoying is that going to be to fix? Because what I need to do is protect my client for all of the work they need to do. I need to give them enough time to do the work they need to do. You need to give the landlord enough time to do what they need to do, but not too much. You need the right to terminate if the landlord is taking too long to fix the things they need to fix. It's an endless sort of parade of imagining the worst case scenario. So, I don't really care where it is. I mostly care about the facts of what exists in this building, what the certificate of occupancy looks like in this building. And to the extent that is causing a lot of problems, that's where I'll step in. But, I never give up any opinions about, neighborhood or foot traffic. It's just not, it's not really my job. I don't know anything about demographics. That's above my pay grade, essentially, so.
Keith, what are some of the biggest red flags that you come across when a deal just won't work?
Well, almost every time it's just knowing what the pro forma is supposed to be and how it's going to look, and try to understand what the financials of that situation are going to look like. And then really it starts to get into when we're dealing with groups that just aren't familiar with doing some of the development here in Manhattan or different challenges that are with it, and just seeing the spending just start to tick and just start going, and people just losing complete track of that, and with a single goal of just whatever it takes to get them open at that point. And then we know from there that the wheels come off the wagon. It's really so hard to get them to go back on. So for us, it's really trying to stop that from happening. But people get so emotional in these things, and when you're working with individual restaurateurs, even more, there's just this lack. There's a lack of sense that gets put into some of these things, and we understand that, and we try to prevent that from happening. We try to put systems in place that'll prevent that from happening, but it doesn't always work that way. And then from there, we try to get things righted, and it's hard. You start going down that road, and it gets a little tricky. So we try to anticipate most of these things from the beginning. We have one person on our team that says quite frequently that this is not sustainable, and as a result, we make sure that he's around for those tough conversations. Right, Andrew?
Grace Ann, what other red flags have you come across in your deal making?
Oh, interesting. Well, I think, there's never a perfect deal. There's always something, and I think it's minimizing what those red flags are. It's interesting how deals are put together now. I remember looking at contracts in my career, and you had to maintain your Zagat review level of, food had to be 25 or higher, or you had to maintain 3 stars in the New York Times, or you had to be in the top 50 Zagat or something like that. And the measurables, aren't there like they used to be. It's really about dollars and cents. And with the marketing being so different with social media, people really want to have followers and, kind of create a huge social media presence. And I'd love to, if anybody can figure out how you get an ROI on that, it would be great to know. But I think going in with a brand that isn't well known and not having that kind of backing of a social presence or the dollars for PR and marketing is sometimes a red flag. I think I was talking to somebody this morning about how you go so far into the project and then they realize that they need branding, or they need these kind of what they saw as extras, and realizing that for them to be successful they really have to have these items, and just not kind of a red flag of not understanding really what the full scope of investment is.
Interesting. So I would love for each of you to give me an example of a partnership that wins and why. So why don't we start with you, Jasmine?
I think having common goals is the most important part. I definitely have clients who are they're chefy. They do television work. They're artists, and I think partnering with people who are very dollars and cents, sort of without regard to that making art is expensive and that making art is maybe not maximizing your profits. I think that's important. I have a client who also pays, is very proud of themselves for paying all of their staff a living wage. But you know what that does is it also lessens what their profit looks like. And being clear with ownership in this deal, that's what it's going to look like. This is a part of their branding. It's a part of their identity, is that they spend this money in this way, and having people agree. We want you to pay people a living wage. We support this. We are behind this. We do this as well. I think not having that, of course, then creates conflict later. They're open 6 months. They're, the profit should be around 18%. Why are they only at 11? Everybody's fussy about it. So I think just, being very transparent, having all of the communications the same way Keith has communications with clients before they agree to engage with them, making sure that all of those priorities financially and even on a non-financial basis are in alignment. But it's hard to do. It's hard to find the right partner. So,
Keith, give me an example of a partnership that wins.
So I'd say there's two aspects of what we do. So first, we have to remember we're consultants. So we walk into a room and we ask our client what their goals are. So as long as we can meet our client's expectation, that's a partnership that wins. So if it's getting the right person in that's going to end up taking over a whole lobby of an office building and having that person having aligned goals with the developer, that's a real win for us, and it's a win for the developer, and everybody works together. And it's really, we start every meeting and every engagement that we have with trying to find out what the goal of the developer, what the goal of the restaurateur is that we're working with, and that's really what makes it a victory for us. If we're working with a restaurateur, that's a different story. And we have the pleasure to work with Wiley Dufresne on what he's doing and the things that he does, and what makes that such a great partnership for us and why our whole team gets excited about working with somebody like Wiley is that he's got his art and his craft and what he does, and Wiley looks to get help and work with us on other things and parts of businesses that he doesn't do, and he works with us and works toward that, and we know where to stay away from when it comes to Wiley. I remember he gave my wife his cookbook, and then my daughter said, "Look, Mommy, now you can cook like Chef Wiley." But we know we can't, so we stay away from that stuff. Right?
Grace Ann, example of a partnership that wins.
I think for me, the easiest partnerships that win are ones that the importance is actually not on the hospitality space or the restaurant. It's more on, for I don't know how many years ago now, but big car companies like Lexus or large banks have decided that partnering with hospitality is a good idea, and I think those are the easiest partnerships because it's not about the profitability of the food and beverage outlet, it's about the brand awareness and partnering with a great chef or a great restaurateur. So to me, those are the easiest ones. I am very fortunate that I'm in a situation where real estate is the most important part, and the amenities are just that. So they just want to create a community and have people want to be in the building, want to be together. So the microscope is out more on the leasing and the price per square foot and not of anything other than let's just break even. So to me, those are the best partnerships.
What's important too is we're all in the same industry having to do with hospitality. So even though a lot of what you do is business oriented, I'm interested to know in how you inject hospitality into what you do. Keith, how are you hospitable?
I can't wait for this answer.
Oh.
I'm going to turn myself.
So I'm very fortunate that I have a group of a dozen people that all come from really great hospitality backgrounds. So we joke about it a lot, but they come from the best restaurant groups, and they've worked on and worked with the best restaurant people. And I have really great friendships with the people that work at these places, and we've spent a lot of time kind of trying to take the culture from those hospitality groups that they worked with and kind of inject it into what we do. We try our best to spend time together outside of work and even take a trip together and kind of like try to get our families to like understand what it is we do and be accepting of the fact that one of us has to work, 100 hours this week to get things done because we have deadlines and things. And I think it's really important that the families kind of understand and that everybody kind of works together as a group and really spends a lot of time getting to know each other, and also really understanding that taking people from great groups and that have left those great groups and really understood really good culture in their hospitality groups, and we try to really embrace that and kind of really bring that into our group.
Grace Ann?
I still seek her approval. I don't know why.
You're very hospitable. You really are. You don't need a team. You are. I think when I'm in a meeting that I'm being introduced to an architect or a liquor lawyer, attorney, whoever it is, we always just jump right into the subject. We always jump into, all right, what can you do for me? How much is it going to cost? And try it. It's really interesting. People get really taken aback where I just start the meeting by saying, well, tell me about yourself. And they start talking about what they do. No. Like, where'd you grow up? What did you do? Did you go to school? How did you get to where you are? And it really puts people at ease. And that I'm not just investing in the fact that they can do this skill for me or this service, but that I want to work with people that I understand and know on a more personal level.
Jasmine, how do you make being an attorney hospitable?
Yeah. I actually think that, the part of me, and I've waited tables like my entire life, I'm really a service industry person. I come from the service industry. I think the way that that's reflected, and I don't want to say not necessarily with my clients, I feel like I try to be approachable and accessible with my clients. I try to make these confounding documents less confounding. I really want to make sure they understand it in a way that's practical, but I do think really where the hospitality comes in is when I'm working with opposing counsel, when I'm working with somebody else's, lawyer, when I'm working with the opposite partner, side of this deal. I am truly, and especially when it comes to lease negotiations, I always get what I want by being kinder, by being nicer, by appealing to reason. I don't play the tough, person, mean, whatever. I'm also 5 feet tall. Like, there's only so much intimidation that I can convey to any single person. I think generally speaking, much of my hospitality background comes into trying to get what I want from people in a way that is, not coming, that is honest and respectful and kind.
So important in everything that we do, and as someone who was given the title of Chief Snack Officer, my husband's business, I can relate that being hospitable is very important no matter what you're doing. Great. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Grace Ann. Thank you, Jasmine. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Fun. Great.
Well, hello. Good to see you. They've started the clock, so we're going to just start talking. Hi. I'm Jeff Gordonier. I'm the food and drinks editor of Esquire magazine. These are our panelists, Allison, JJ, and Didier. We're going to just get straight to the talk, so if you want to learn more about them, just Google it to save time. I want to start by asking, this whole talk is about risk. And I wanted to start by asking, what's the biggest professional risk you've ever taken? JJ?
Hey, how's everyone doing today? I live for the risk. Risk.
It's all risk with you.
Yeah, I mean, big risk equals big reward, and I think everything I've done in my career has been a risk. Even as I look forward right now, I'm probably going to take a big risk, but working with Alexander Smalls was a risk, and doing the first Afro-Asian American restaurant when there was nobody ever cooking that food in America before.
That was the Cecil,
in
Harlem, which was Esquire's #1 best new restaurant in America in 2014.
Yeah. And then I would say, opening a rice shop between 115th and 116th in Harlem, which in that corridor has the highest unemployment rate, and convincing people to come to an area that was at one point the unsafest area in New York City, a corner where Malcolm X spoke, and changing the landscape. And I would say that's the risk, is, opening doors for people after me. That's what I look forward to doing.
How many people have eaten at Field Trip? I'm putting you on the spot.
Not enough.
Okay, not enough. We got a lot of work to do. You got to get it.
It's right in front of the 2 and 3 train, so it's super easy.
Allison, how about you? Biggest risk?
I would say a couple come to mind. Starting a business 5 years ago felt absolutely terrifying for like a deeply type A calculated person, even though because of that it was a calculated risk. I felt very aware of what failure looked like, and I think that's an important part of taking risk. I don't necessarily believe in jumping off of a cliff and having no idea what the net below might look like or whether there is one. So that was terrifying. Honestly, 5 years later, I think it still is terrifying.
So you're saying you're against the Tom Cruise and Jerry Maguire just quit, free falling kind of thing. You have to plan it.
I personally have to plan it, and as a consultant who works with restaurateurs primarily who are opening businesses for the first time, I believe in knowing what's on the other side, even if you can't point. None of us can point to exactly what the outcome is going to be. But surprise birthday parties are one thing. Surprises in how businesses turn out and what the options are, I think that's less enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Diddy and I were talking backstage. His whole career as well has been sort of a journey of risks. He moved from France to New York City, and now he's moved from New York City to Chicago, which is a completely different place in terms of eating. So what do you think is the biggest risk you've taken?
Good morning. I think the first one, is when I said yes to the cast to come and open in 2000 the restaurant. It was difficult for multiple reasons. First, by the language, the culture, and in a new city as New York. So I think that's the first one. Most of the time, the biggest risk we take is because we wanted to know what kind of food or what kind of story we want to say in the restaurant. And as soon as you don't find that story, you don't have a real restaurant. So I think that's the biggest. After, I associate risk and challenge. And I like those. I like to take the new challenge. I like to go in something that you don't know and push yourself to find out and to try to understand where you cooked and for who you cooked and what you cooked.
A few days ago, Allison and I had a great conversation on the phone, looking forward to this panel. And I was mentioning there was this Broadway producer named David Belasco who used to say a famous thing that's kind of haunted me. People would come up to him all the time and say, I have an idea for a Broadway show. And he would give them his business card. And he would say, if you can write the idea for the show on the back of this card right now, we can talk. But if you can't fit it on the card, you don't have an idea. And that dovetailed with something that Allison really brilliantly was discussing, which I'd love to hear from, which is the importance of a clear vision when you're starting a restaurant.
I would say in the context of risk, that might be the greatest one, to not have clarity of vision. So many of the conversations that we had last night and between all of us on the stage when we're pointing to restaurants that we really love and experiences that we keep going back to, even as professionals in this profession, we can't even totally point to what was it about that experience that was so memorable, so comfortable, so engaging. And I think it's this conversion around vision. Every single detail in a restaurant needs to point to the same place. As human beings, we just inherently don't like confusion. We don't like to feel confused as guests. We definitely don't like to feel confused as employees and as leaders. And if you don't know what you're doing and why you're doing it, and I've already used that business card quote once between now and Friday, I don't think that you have a business. It needs to be clear. And if it can't fit on a business card, maybe that's many chapters of restaurants that you have to open, but start with one.
I liked how you were saying on the phone that that idea, that perspective, the POV of the restaurant, applies not just to the cooking, but to the mode of hospitality, the decor. Everything has to kind of stick with that central idea.
It's one decision that makes 1,000. That's what it should be. You make one central decision, and every single decision should trickle down from that one. Makes things actually a lot easier.
In that sense, I think of all the great work that JJ has done, and I think there's always been a clarity of vision with your work, JJ. Like the Cecil was the POV was very strong, right? And Field Trip has a very strong perspective. It's, like rice is culture is the mantra of the restaurant. And yet there's still a risk because you're ahead of the curve, because these are not necessarily ideas always that are familiar to the customers.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I can write it on the back of a business card and say this is what the concept is. But, a lot of places that I've traveled and cooked, most people have never even been to and would never understand the flavor, right? Or would compare it to something that's not supposed to be compared to. So for me, the ideal concept is because I've been able to educate myself in an area that many other people haven't been able to educate themselves in. So when you do come eat food, my food, or other people's food that you don't understand, you should bring a friend, like call a lifeline that might understand it a little bit, or go in with an open mind to understand the POV and don't treat it as novelty, as a one-time dining experience. What we do with a lot of cultural eating. We go in and we just look at it as this one time, we experience it, it's great, it was amazing, and then we go on to something very familiar that everybody else knows on the back of the business card, or that you know on the back of the business card, but that business card or that concept you might not understand doesn't mean that it's not right or won't work.
Didier, I wanted to ask you, you worked for years with Alain Ducasse, yeah, and one of the... I compare this to, there was a magazine called Condé Nast Portfolio, which a lot of people talk about as the last great big magazine launch in America before the collapse, in some ways, of the publishing business. And Alain Ducasse at the Essex House, in some ways, is similar to that. That was this big money, a lot of attention, I don't even know how many Michelin stars Chef Ducasse has, but you were associated with that. And it seemed from the outset like a low-risk kind of thing, and yet it was controversial. Can you talk about that and that experience?
Yes, because I think at that level of details, you have to see yourself, like when you go into the kind of this restaurant, you have a magic in between the lighting and magic in between the table, the napkins, the tablecloth, the china, the wine. So I think it's a little bit of everything who make a night. Yes. And behind that, you have to find the story. What is the story? What do you want to tell? What do you want to tell through the menu that you are writing? Are the season are important? Are the product that you're selecting are important? Do you want it to exactly doing French cuisine with not the same product, or the product that you can find as a similar, but it's not really the same one here? So I think that's all those details. All that you need to find your story. I'm keeping saying the story because it is a story. You have to find like writing a book about this is what I want to say, what I want. So it does take times. You have to understand the culture. And on Ducasse, or any restaurant of Ducasse, every little details are very, very important. For example, you eating with napkins who are 50 and 70 for all the savory, and you're going into the dessert with a square one and 40 and 40 because it's like the tea time in. So every little things have been a thought behind that, and that makes a lot of risk because I don't know if you remember, but we had crazy stuff at that time where we have pen that we're giving to
when you signed your bill, which was a fairly exorbitant bill, is it fair to say? You would get a choice of pens to sign it with.
And it was crazy, but on the point of Duke, I said, if I'm going to Mont Blanc and I'm buying something, they're going to give me a Mont Blanc to sign my check. So I don't know if it makes sense, but the real idea behind that was with the knife, and I think that was great. We create different kind of knife, like the different way to alter the knife to hit different meat. Like if you hit a squab, you don't need the same knife than if you hit a cut de boeuf.
Yeah.
So that was really great. And after you extend to a stupid little thing.
Well, there was the thing that many people seem to remember about this restaurant was that there was a little stool that you could put your purse on.
But look, in every restaurant now you have a hook to put your things. So it was the beginning. He opened a door that creates other details, restaurant-oriented now, but it was 20 years ago.
Was it a timing issue then? I mean,
I think there was a little timing issue. First, if you remember at that time, all the main restaurants who's doing tasting menu at $75, $80, $85. If you look at after Ducasse, we opened with a menu at $150 and $250, which was like, wow, crazy. In 2003, every restaurant has a $175 menu. So, but the table was for you for all the dinner. We never turned the table. You have your own. There was like all the tablecloth was washed in the restaurant. So I don't know if those details people understand when you go to the restaurant, but that was a fact. It was done like this because I think the origin of the France or French gastronomy, it's okay on that level, on the 3 Michelin star. It's only for 50 people who's working for 50 cover.
Right. Since then, how has the restaurant business evolved in terms of what customers want, Allison?
I think that luxury looks different now. Because
Luxury looks different.
Sort of. I think that we live in a bit of a social ice age by way of technology and our deep-rooted relationships with our phones and our laptops, and I'm not condemning any of that. I think that that's just a necessary part of all of our lives. But I think that when we dine out, I think restaurants are these like last bastions of publicly available places to engage and connect and, dare I say, feel loved. And so luxury isn't, to me, so much anymore that people are craving 4 different napkins throughout their meal. Not to say that didn't have a place. I think it does. I think it's a beautiful attention to detail. But I think what people want now more than anything else is to be seen and to be taken care of in a very human way. And I think that that's much harder, and I also think it's more worthwhile.
Well, it seems that in regard to what the customer wants and in regard to exploring culture, the aspirations of chefs have changed so much. I mean, 15, 20 years ago, JJ, you might have been aspiring to work at a Ducasse restaurant or something, but in fact what you're doing is being entrepreneurial, starting your own brand with Field Trip. At the tasting menu level, we have places like Blanca and Atomix, Momofuku Co. that are a completely different vibe than 20 years ago or whatever. So do you feel like chefs want something different?
I mean, it all depends on where you are in your career. And I just give you a backstory about Field Trip. Like, Field Trip was supposed to be a full-service restaurant. But when we did the numbers, it just didn't add up. It just wouldn't pay the bills. It didn't make sense. Like, who would pay $26 for a rice bowl, right? That's like convincing everybody, like, it's okay to pay $26 for a rice bowl. And when I say it's okay, it's like we're not funded to a level where we can just like super test, like, okay, you'll pay $26 today, but 3 months from now we'll go to $15. And the only person I can think that was able to really do that and convince somebody at that level was David Chang. Like, he convinced us that it was okay to eat without backs on the chairs. It was okay to eat ramen noodles this way, right? And we said if we were going to convince people, we would do it in a very moderate, affordable dining way, right? So we'll put it where you order from the counter. We'll talk about the rice, but we won't really go into that detail. We won't say in your face that the rice is freshly milled from the farm and we've refrigerated our rice and there's no bleaching or all this motto behind what we do. We're going to figure out how to cost it right and give you the best product that any chef would give you at a 4-star restaurant or at our restaurant. And for me, it was about what can I afford to do in my career at the moment. It was less about what I wanted to do. I think some chefs and some entrepreneurs are luckily able to do what they want to do because they have a lot of funding, right? They're able to fund a restaurant like a tech company. And I think as I start to move forward in the funding process, we will fund Field Trip like a tech company. We'll fund it like WeWork was funded. We will fund it like some of my peers are like Oculus was funded, right? Where you're able to have all this money to float around to then figure out what your concept is, so then you're able to project it into the world and it is successful. Because you don't really know who you are until you do it. And who I am today as a chef is different of who I was when I was doing a residency program at Chef's Club or when I was doing the Henry or when I was at Cecil. I've evolved and I look at things different. I look at things very much from like a really strong business perspective and how much things really cost to execute. So yeah, I believe that chefs are evolving based on who they are and what they want to be.
I want to point out that Didier recently moved to Chicago, and he's not working the line at a restaurant as a chef. He's actually overseeing menu development at a whole bunch of restaurants in a restaurant group, the same group that has Au Cheval and places like that, many, many restaurants. And in fact, backstage, he was showing me on his phone a kind of breakdown spreadsheet sort of thing of all these dishes they're experimenting with, exploring. And he was saying he's about to introduce blood sausage and tripe dishes to the kind of committee that decides. So that's a fascinating point of view in terms of risk and being in Chicago. What are you learning about what the audience wants at all these different places?
I don't know yet what Chicago wants. What I know by my experience or the long years, it's they want to have a real food. They want to have a real soul of the chef. They don't want to have something just done, because if you look at 20 years ago, 25 years ago, every restaurant has, or luxury restaurant has, turbo, foie gras, truffle, caviar. It was a bunch of lists like that. Everything was the same, different preparation. Now, I think the luxury in those restaurants is more like having the best wild caught sardine with a piece of butter. It's like, do you prefer to eat a farm turbo or a wild fish? And I think Chicago is the same, still with the culture, or very heavy, deep culture of the Middle West. I think they want also to explore something. They wanted to, everyone is like, if you trust someone and that person said, okay, try it. We were talking about that, and even with the kids, it's like they tried, and if they like it, they like it. So yeah, I think people are more open, more willing to try something else, but only if they know where it's coming from. The real issue right now is we don't know, or we don't want to eat something that we don't know if it's coming from a mass production or something bad for you, and that's the real luxury product, I think.
I've noticed more and more a lot of restaurants getting attention in which they're the product of partnerships between people who are not just professionally involved, but romantically involved, married. I mean, I think of Scott and Angie at Don Angie, Rita and Jody at Via Carota. Everybody's probably been there. JP and Elia at Atomix. Allison, from your standpoint, if you're working with a restaurant like that, that's the driving force is a couple. Is there risk inherent in that? Like, what would be your perspective on that?
That is such an interesting question. I don't know that I think that there's necessarily any. I think that partnership is incredibly important. I think that, partnership is the meaning of our lives, and having partners in business and in life and in friendship and in family is everything. And if you can, I think having self-awareness in a relationship and mixing it with business is probably the most critical factor. I was actually just listening to Dana Cowan's interview of Jen Pelka and Charles Bilili's this morning on my way in, and I think that they articulated it very well. I mean, they're very clear about where they differ and how they differ, and they've got clear boundaries within their relationship and their businesses. But in general, I think if you can combine passion and purpose with your relationship, I mean, we all spend a ton of time working. It's a gift to be able to do it with somebody that you love.
One of the things we talked about on the phone, it almost seems rudimentary or not quite as dependent on the muse and creativity, but you were saying that one way to minimize risk is simply to have systems in place, leadership, team building, just lock it down, really.
Yes. I think that things that are not communicated don't exist. And having systematized communication and intentional organizational structure is absolutely necessary. I mean, you have to have that. It's like salt in cooking. You can have the most expensive dining room and the best products and the most talented team, but if you don't have salt, flavor doesn't sing. And if you don't have communication and structure and intentionality with leadership, it's the exact same thing for a restaurant organization. It doesn't work.
How about, let's talk about failure. What happens when you fail? I'm not saying any of you have, of course.
I failed.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And then how do you come back from that and take another risk, feel willing to take another risk?
I mean, I think the first thing is you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say you failed, right? And you can say you failed with the people you partnered with, right? You didn't do enough research to find out who they were when you partnered with them and they took advantage of you, right? Or you can say you failed in your partnership, not just your partnership with who you're with in the restaurant, but your partnership at home. There's plenty of us in this industry that fail with our partners at home on a daily basis because we're so consumed in our restaurants. And me and my wife have this conversation all the time about how much I'm consumed in the restaurant, and sometimes I'm just not as consumed at home with her, right? That's failure to me. And that's something that we have talked about to make better, because that's how I was trained, right? That's how a lot of us are trained. But to come back, I think for me, I'll point out a failure of mine was the Henry. That was a failure for me. That made my 2019 year really hard because it's something I poured my heart into and made a lot of people believe in on my team. And to go from that right into field trip when it was supposed to be something very easy to go into, when it was very well thought through, calculated, executed, was hard to just get up every day and say, okay, this is my restaurant now and I'm going to make it great. But, I live by like a slogan that's tattooed on my arm, that passion plus drive equals success. And I kind of just push myself. And I'm also just really fortunate to have like parents that care, family that care, that were just really there to be like, come on, you're better than this. And we fail every day. People fail every day, and you can get up from any failure. But the one thing I would say is you have to accept it. You can't go through life stating that you've never failed or you didn't fail in this moment.
I mean, I feel like that must have taken the wind out of your sails a bit, because Henry, New York Times, one of the best new restaurants in the city that year, and then just really weeks later, right? Months later, it's... Yeah,
no. That was like somebody gut checking you completely and you weren't paying attention at all. That's the best way I can put it. But the one thing I would say that the positive that came out of that was like I was able for, I think, other hotel owners, other restaurateurs to say, maybe I will bet on somebody of color. Maybe I will go with an African American in the space. right? Because when we look at hotels across the country, we don't see partnerships with African American chefs. And we could probably name a couple. But like I said, it's a couple. So at that moment, it was like, oh, if New York is doing it, then I can do it in Portland, or I can do it in Austin, or I can do it in New Orleans. That's how I looked at it, the positivity that came from it. And I'm always willing to put myself out there for people that look like me any day of the week so that they're set up for the future to be successful, especially knowing that my kids are coming up. And not to say that my kids are going to be chefs. They're in the kitchen with me. If you watch me on Instagram, sometimes they're in the kitchen with me all the time cooking. But it was kind of like the same thing that Diddy said at the Grammys. Was like, hey, rappers haven't been getting respect in the industry from the Grammy Recording Academy for years. And that really hit home for me. Was like, African Americans and black chefs have been cooking in the food industry for years, and we haven't got really no respect yet. So if I feel like I'm Diddy of the industry right now, and I'm going to put myself out there to make sure that it gets carved out. So I'll take that risk or failure at any moment.
It's interesting how how things have unfolded for you. Like, you won the James Beard Award with Alexander Smalls for the Cecil Cookbook, like just last year, right?
Yeah, Between Harlem and Heaven, get your copy.
It's a great book. It's a great book. These days, what would you say is the chief risk factor in opening a restaurant? Number one.
Money.
Money. But how about money? What about it?
We raise money to open a restaurant for 3 months, right? You do the P&L, you put the money, you're like, okay, I have enough money for 3 months. What happens after 3 months?
That's
you don't
from
even
investors?
know you don't even know your customer.
Yeah.
You made up this number, you made up this stuff, and you said this is what we're going to be. And then you get to the 3-month mark, and you've been funding it on the loss, which most of us have done in the first 3 months. And then you get to day 91, and you're like, ooh, right? So I think money is the biggest thing, and there's a lot of restaurants that I know that have been able to have money that have gotten them to year 3, and then after year 3, they started to make money because people knew who they were, or they knew who they were, and then they were able to move forward. So it's a really big investment.
Allison?
I'm thinking about this one. I mean, to me, the most, I agree with JJ. I think money is probably number one. I think people are up there. I mean, it's challenging to, related to money, have the runway that you need to know that you're going to be able to find and then train a leadership team and a staff that's going to be able to execute and support this vision that you've put so much time into creating. And I think to an extent, when you know you're opening a restaurant, you can plan for that and recruit those people and have them under your wings, but you can only do that to a certain extent. And I think people are always the magic sauce. So,
what do you think is the riskiest thing?
I think I'm agree with the money part of thing, because every time it's like when you want to try something, you need money. But we're talking. I wanted to jump also on the failure things that because I think the failure is its experience is addition of failure. You have to learn. And I wanted to go back in 2005 when I was dreaming to have 3 Michelin stars, and I go back in France to run that. And in fact, I stayed 5 years. We got 2 stars. I never get the 3 Michelin star. And I learned the biggest lesson that I have in my life is like, instead of cooking for the world, you have to cook first for the community or for the local people, the neighborhood, and after for your city, and after for your country, and after whatever. And I think this is. Money, it's part of it, but after it's like, does the restaurant that you're doing is making sense to do it? Are you just doing a restaurant, or are you doing something different? And this is what today we have access with internet, with everything, to all the different concepts, all the different restaurants around the world. So what are you doing? It makes sense or not?
How did you process it when that 3rd Michelin star wasn't coming through?
It was very, I can't talk about it now. It took me like 10 years to talk about it, but I got all those Michelin stars with Ducasse, and when I tried by myself, I stayed, and every year we had that. It's today. Today they release the stars in France. So I feel my phone beeping. So everyone texting for what is the announcement are. But every January, February, you have that Michelin big thing, and starting of the beginning of January, you have the rumor on different newspapers in France, and the rumor are like by percentage, and you have like 50% of the chance that you can have a star, 60%, 70%, whatever. And I've been like for 3 years in a row with 90%. So for me, it was done in my head, and it never been. So I think that's the biggest. I think you need to realize that it's stupid because you're working for something that you cannot control. And you should work for yourself and to please the customer.
I think for so many of us in this profession, it doesn't come naturally to separate your self-worth from professional accomplishment and achievement. And when that's the case, to JJ's point, being able to separate yourself enough from failure to recognize it, you can't do that until you've separated who you are with the feeling of failure. Feeling failure rather than being a failure. I think if you are completely enmeshed, self-worth and professional accomplishment, failure really can be debilitating.
You work with many restaurants as a consultant. I assume, has every single one succeeded?
That's a loaded question because I think every individual has a different definition of success. I think I work with restaurateurs who would regard their projects maybe as in part or entirely as a failure, even if they are still open and financially successful, because those projects didn't express themselves the way that they wanted, they weren't received the way that they wanted. But yeah, I guess I've worked with restaurants in both senses that have financially failed and that have also failed in a different way.
Does that impact you personally, since you have a role in creating that restaurant?
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of myself as the Sherpa. If my hiker
You're like
falls
the
off the
midwife
mountain,
of the
it's
restaurant.
not good. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Last question, quickly. What's a risk from the standpoint of media coverage? What's something you don't want to do?
What does that mean, Jeff?
I mean, there's so much scrutiny of restaurants right now. It's 24/7, social media, blogs, magazines. There's just is there a risk inherent in how you present yourself?
I would say the risk, right? I could take that a lot of different ways as I see the clock ticking.
You're just going to run out the clock?
No, I'm not going to. I was hoping somebody was going to cut me off.
I mean, I think it's a risk because you have no idea.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, what
and do you are you opening a restaurant for the media, or are you opening the restaurant for the community? Right? Like I'm opening the restaurant for the community to be able to eat in there every day. If the media comes, that's really great for us because that gets to tell people to come eat at our restaurant. But I'm probably going to start writing op-eds towards the media because I watch where the media eats and they're not fair. Not you.
But we've had this conversation.
We talk about it all the time.
If you're in food media and you haven't been to Harlem to eat a field trip, Taronga, a lot of places, I'd say you're dropping the ball.
I listen to people. I listen to media tell me all the time it's easier to get to Chicago than it gets to Harlem, but you got to drive by Harlem to get to Chicago. Unless you're going to Newark.
Amazing.
I mean, I think always at the end of the day in media, outside of media, our best hope is to do work that has integrity and that feels true to us and meaningful and purposeful, and that does not guarantee a positive media outcome. But at least you get to, fail and go to sleep at night feeling good about yourself.
We're out of time, which sucks. The clock is already done. So thanks so much to this trio, incredible group of people.
This episode is brought to you by Verterra, impressively versatile, stylishly sustainable, environmentally disposable dinnerware from fallen leaves. Verterra is a mission-driven company focused on making environmentally responsible, single-use products. Founded in 2006 on the belief that every culinary creation deserves a beautiful, sustainably crafted foundation. Verterra reclaims earthly discards like fallen leaves and tree scraps to design elegant, disposable dinnerware that elevates the look of food presentation. In short, a beautiful, disposable plate that can go with your food to a composting facility. The team from Verterra recently made a huge pivot with their factories and started producing masks, gloves, sanitizer, and other PPE that food businesses need to safely reopen. Learn more at verterra.com. That's VERTERRA.com.
Just live the way you wish.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Elena Martinez. I am the co-founder of a website called New Worlder, which is a culinary travel site that explores food and drink through the Latin American perspective, and the founder of Meets New York City, which is an events brand that brings chefs into New York to showcase their culinary heritage. But most importantly to this panel, I'm a Brooklyn resident. And I want to welcome you to today's session, Changing Neighborhoods, Changing Needs, Brooklyn and Beyond, where we'll explore how restaurants and the hospitality industry really put Brooklyn on the map. While this has affected nearly every part of the borough, when we asked one of our panelists, Alice Chang, where most people mean when they think of Brooklyn in terms of food and drink, she says that the answer to that question is North Brooklyn, here, essentially, Williamsburg. And it's the most sought out part of Brooklyn when we think about influences and inspiration. And there's plenty to discuss past Brooklyn, and that's why past Williamsburg, and that's why our panelists kind of make up a different swath of what's happening here on a larger scale. So I'd like to introduce them. Brandon Hoy, on the end, is the co-owner of the iconic Roberta's in Bushwick, which opened in 2008. As we'll talk a little bit on the panel, Roberta's is the Brooklyn institution that many closely associate with the borough around the world. And over the years, it's grown to include the 2 Michelin-starred tasting-driven Blanca, and now in Los Angeles Outpost. Alongside co-owner and chef Carlo Miraci, Hoy founded Roberta's with the goal of providing the underserved neighborhood of Bushwick with artisanal food and drinks and, of course, vibe. At the helm of daily operations, Hoy also fronts their art department, which is responsible for packaging and merchandise. Sean, next to me, Sean Feeney partnered with then neighbor Chef Missy Robbins in 2014 to build their hospitality company, Grove House. Together, they're responsible for 2 of Williamsburg's most popular restaurants, Lilia and Missy, which opened in 2016 and 2018, and both received 3 stars from the New York Times. Until 2019, when he finally stepped back to focus solely on his restaurants, Feeney spent 16 years in finance at companies like Cantor Fitzgerald and Goldman Sachs. And in addition to Missy and Lilia, Sean is the managing partner of Hometown Barbecue and Red Hook Tavern. Alice Chang, in the middle, is the founder and CEO of Culinary Agents, a professional networking and job marketing website designed for the hospitality industry. Culinary Agents has become something of a marker of the changing needs and trends of restaurants in New York City, and she'll help us make sense of how that spotlight shifted away from New York City to Brooklyn over the last 10 years or so. She currently serves as an advisor for FoodX, an accelerator program for food-related tech startups, and for Women in Hospitality United, a nonprofit that works toward developing new standards for equity, accountability, and transparency within hospitality. Now that we got all that out of the way, I want to start with the growth of Bushwick. In 2008, a restaurant called Roberta's jumped onto the culinary landscape, taking a once desolate area of the borough and making it hot and interesting and a destination that people travel to eat pizza. So there was stuff happening in Williamsburg at that time, and we'll talk about some of that as we talk about Missy and Lilia and Sean's experience. But I really think that Brandon has kind of an interesting outlook on what launched this global Brooklyn thing. So, Brandon, if you want to just tell us a little bit about, paint the picture of Bushwick then, before Roberta's,
Sure.
what led up to it, and how it changed.
Yeah, I think there is a common misconception that it was desolate, and I think there's two very distinct parts of Bushwick, and where we were is still actually considered East Williamsburg. It was the East Williamsburg Industrial Park. And when we moved there, even prior to moving there, we were hanging out in the neighborhood, and it was largely blue-collar neighborhood. There was a lot of industry there. There was still, cement factories. Boar's Head has a large distribution center there. There's the wonton factory. So a lot of what was happening was still very industrial. And at night, it was very dark. There was a pack of wild dogs that lived in the neighborhood when we got there. Desolate to the sense that it still felt very empty, and there wasn't a lot happening. And there was a strong community that lived there. There was a lot of people that had been there for years who were working in this industries and the factories close by. And there was also a budding artist neighborhood that was forming as well. There was a lot of large spaces for people to work in and to live work. And it was starting to really have this undertow of creativeness that we started to see. And I was introduced to it, 3 years prior to this. A friend, Chops, had opened a bar called Kings County. It was really kind of one of the first things to happen in the industrial park. And there was just a lot of, there was just a sense of creativeness that was happening there. And there was a lot of artists. And a lot of music that was happening, and I think that was what really drew us to the neighborhood. We just really felt like this was a place that was affordable for young people to kind of get a lot of space and be creative. But the one thing that we noticed quickly was that there wasn't a lot in the neighborhood to do. Outside of Kings County, there wasn't a lot of amenities for people who were living in the neighborhood. Most of these people were jumping back on the L train and heading into Williamsburg or going into the East Village. And this cycle of kind of artistry has happened for years, right? It's whether it was Soho and then moved to the East Village, we've seen this progression happen, and it just happened to be that at that time that Bushwick was that place where it was happening, and it was palatable. You could really sense it when you were there, that there was this really young energy, and that was prior to Roberta's. We just knew that it existed there, and really our goal in the beginning was to create a watering hole for these people and like-minded people and people of this neighborhood to kind of bring the community together. And we found it to be such a beautiful neighborhood despite all of this kind of post-apocalyptic exterior and the wild dogs. It was definitely a place where we could light fireworks. It almost seemed lawless at the time that we were there, and but also just such a beautiful place for us to create something. And what was important to us really was that we were young. And we didn't have a lot of money to get into this, but we knew this is what we wanted to do. And East Williamsburg Industrial Park was a place that was accepting to us and was affordable for us to move into. And thank God, it was beautiful.
Sean, tell us a little bit about the opening of Lilia and the search for where you were going to open this new restaurant. Missy had been off the scene for a few years, and it was really important to find the right space. You were in the West Village, which is ground zero for amazing new restaurants.
Yeah, so when Missy and I were living in the same building as each other for about 5 years, we came to this moment where my wife and I had this idea of potentially partnering with her to open her own restaurant. And she said no to me a lot of times over the course of 4 months, but those conversations, every time she was saying no to me, we were having some great developments in what our company was going to be founded upon. So when she finally did say yes to us, we knew that she was going to be the creative force, but we also were able to agree on how we were going to run a successful and profitable business too, because if we were, she would have the greatest canvas and biggest canvas she could ever want to paint on. So once that night did happen and we said, let's do this, we then spent 10 months trying to will ourselves into a space in the West Village because that's where we lived. And it was just not possible. And then we started going to other places in Manhattan, which were not possible either. And by luck, I was able to find a space through a friend in North Williamsburg that was an auto body shop. And I sent Missy a text, and we were very frustrated. We weren't sure if this partnership was even going to last to see a restaurant open. And I texted her the space. And because my dad's in the audience right now, I'm not going to say exactly what the text back to me was, but it did say, I am not opening an effing restaurant in effing Brooklyn.
So you said it.
Yes. And I said, well, listen, we might not be able to open a restaurant together, period. So can you please just go look? And she did go look. And the catalyst was financial. The second thing that made this happen was Missy having the vision, seeing the bones of the disgusting auto body shop, where two people were actually squatting on the side room. During the night, they would throw raves, and they would wake up in the morning hungover and sleep, and then there were actually cars in the space when she went in to see it. So I was at work texting her, what is it like? Tell me like a little something. And she's like, Jesus, I don't even know where I am. Like, I literally don't know where the subway stop is. So I said, okay, well, but she's like, I think we should come and look. So for the next couple weeks, we would go every single day possible to just look at this neighborhood. And what we saw was we definitely did not look like anybody in the neighborhood. I was wearing Gucci loafers and one of those like finance Patagonia vests, so I definitely did not look anything like. But we did see these buildings that were going up.
I was one of the squatters in that building.
Yeah. I don't wear those Gucci loafers anymore. And what we were doing was we were walking around and seeing this vibrant community, this young, diverse community, and a lot of these buildings going up. So we were like, gosh, we got a shot. You know, we were definitely motivated by the finances. We were inspired by the bones. But now we're like, this could be a reality because we got a shot to welcome these people in. So that's when we felt good about it. So 14 months later, we opened Lilia in January of 2016. And our whole thing was, we wanted it to be an extension of our home. That's how we became friends. That's how we became family and partners. And we wanted this place that we were opening to be an extension of our home. And we wanted to create these inspiring dining experiences to help make every day a good day. The only way we were going to be able to do that was when somebody entered, anybody, they needed to feel like they were safe, and while they were in our presence, to feel comfort, not to think about anything else that was going on before they arrived, so that it gave them the opportunity to leave happier. And that's what we tried to do every single day. And what we heard and what we saw were, as proud as we were to deliver those experiences, the people that were coming to dine from the neighborhood were as proud to be there. They also were talking a lot, and we would hear every night how proud they were that we were a part of their neighborhood, and that they felt like Lilia was an extension of their home. And that was pretty awesome to feel. And from that point on, no matter what we were going to do together, Missy and I, we wanted to really be a part of this community. And I think it was, looking around, understanding that we had this responsibility now to be a part of this incredibly strong neighborhood that had this rich and diverse history, but also that we had an opportunity, almost an obligation, to push it forward and to be a part of an exciting future. And that's kind of what led us now to Missy, which is in South Williamsburg, where the building that we went into definitely didn't have any bones. It was actually it was just a white box. It wasn't inspiring at all. And it was the challenge to create a warm environment and a cool environment that we had at Lilia. But it was the catalyst for us to be a part of South Williamsburg, this revitalization and this relaunch, and to be part of the exciting future of growth. And forever now, that's kind of what we're focused on. And I think it's about two things. As much as we wanted to create this environment inside our walls, we now saw what the power of creating that environment outside of the walls and investing in that community and engaging in a community, what type of magic that can create. And although that's what we do every night, we feed people and make them happier, we do have this amazing ability right now to invest and engage in the community outside of our restaurants too, and we do many things to do it.
Well, in between opening of Lilia and Missy and after Roberta's, 2011, Sifton reviewed Roberta's in the Times, and 2017? 16, you got a 3-star for Lilia. So in between that, Culinary Agents started in 2012. So you're saddled in between these two incredible touchstone restaurants for Brooklyn. Can you just tell us a little bit about what was happening after Roberta's got this incredible review and before Lilia came along and created a new buzz in Williamsburg?
Absolutely, and we started in 2012, and we're a tech startup that was focused on how do we create tools to better support small business owners, restaurateurs that were struggling with not just finding the right people, but also having operations tools that were efficient, and ultimately, how do you project your employer brand and tell people that you're looking for great talent and make it easy for them to apply to your jobs. So, one thing that I will say in general, which both of these gentlemen and their partners have done, is when folks say we want Brooklyn or we want this to be like Brooklyn, I think what they're referring to is this vibe. For folks who have never even been here or spent any time here, you see them referring, I want to create a space like that. And that's really something really incredible that I think, the folks in the room here and people who are seeking out new spaces, is that hospitality and the restaurants that you all create define and develop neighborhoods that then not only inspire the immediate community and, cities around it, but also other cities. I mean, we're nationwide. I'll go into, Atlanta and people will be like, I want that Brooklyn vibe. I'm like, oh, have you been there? They're like, no. I'm like, okay. But between social media and all the access to things, and it's really incredible thing for us to see as we've grown. But sorry, I digress. Specifically back to Brooklyn, what we saw, and I ran, is align with our growth. One thing that really interestingly happened in that time frame was that not only did we have a spike in more businesses in the Brooklyn area looking for talent, but this was the only area that the applicants were outpacing the number of jobs that were posting by 500 to 1,000%. In other areas, you see some correlation of more businesses, more jobs, more applicants. In Brooklyn specifically, from 2015 to 2017, the number of applicants were skyrocketing and outpacing the number of jobs, which was something that we were not seeing happen in other cities and other neighborhoods.
And farewell to that time.
Well, in terms of, Roberta's and Lilia and Missy, are your staff living in the area? I mean, where are they coming from? And are they living in the area that, you have created for them? Are they locals, or do they travel to get to your spots? Like, have you created true community around your restaurants?
I think we're really fortunate because I would say 80% of our teams live within a 3-mile radius of our restaurants. And what that creates is the opportunity to live a healthier life in terms of walking to work or riding a bike. Also, financially, they're not spending a third of their earnings each night taking an Uber home to Brooklyn at 1:30 in the morning. I also think it's a pretty magical thing that has been created in that when they're at the restaurant, they're viewed as friends of our guests. And what we've seen them going to baby showers, weddings, or special life events outside of our restaurants where they've essentially made relationships with our guests and neighbors. And it's a pretty powerful thing. And that I don't believe would have been able to have happened in the West Village if we did open a restaurant there.
Brandon, you see similar?
Yeah, I mean, almost all of our employees come from the area, you know, pushing out to East New York, but primarily most of them are coming from Bushwick and Williamsburg, and it has been kind of since the early days, and I think there's still just like there's still it's still affordable. You know, this is probably changing-ish, yeah, but still, you know, further out in Bushwick is still affordable. But we're seeing less people coming from Williamsburg, less employees that are coming from Williamsburg. It's actually trending further east, to be honest with you, East New York and those neighborhoods.
Alice, you had said something interesting to me when we were talking that in like 2015, 2016, Brooklyn became its own search tab, right? Is that right? Explain a little bit about that because it's fascinating in the bar.
Yeah, so we, and a lot of this, the caveat is a lot of it was the growth of our company, right? Right now we have almost 1 million users across the U.S. and, you know, the New York tri-state area is our biggest metro. In the beginning, we had bundled everything in together to the New York City area as one major metro area. And then around the times that we talked about, we realized that we wanted better data. We wanted to be able to see migration patterns. We wanted to understand, you know, why are we getting spikes of average applicants? Is it because now people who live in Brooklyn have other options, have more options, have more places that they specifically are seeking out to work, and you know, instead of just applying to Manhattan restaurants, they're applying
and the cost of living as well, right?
Exactly.
Which I think becomes such a factor in this whole thing. It's not an easy business to make it in, and like for the most part, these people are like looking for places that are affordable for them to live. I would say, outside of your back of house staff, a lot of these people are searching for a different destination for their career, whether it is in music or acting, but they're all looking for something else when they first get into this. And I think those people are typically looking for places to live that they can afford.
Absolutely, and we actually have a willing to relocate feature that we had added, and we also noticed people were specifically calling out Brooklyn versus just willing to relocate to New York City area. And so that's kind of when we started breaking out and being able to look at the trends for Brooklyn separate from New York City. It's pretty interesting.
Sean, you had mentioned that in your staff living local, that there's a wellness piece that comes in to play when they're biking to work or walking to work that like didn't even dawn on you when you were seeing what was happening with your staffing at Lilia. Missy.
Yeah, it's been an awesome thing for people to feel like they can wake up and go for a workout or a class of yoga or Pilates or meditate or therapy, and they can do all of that stuff before they come to work, and financially they're able to live a healthier life too, which is a huge, you know, thing for people and their well-being.
So
it's getting stuck in the train, just like, you know, it's not healthy for anybody.
Or fun. It's not really that fun either. What are the benefits, do you think, to all of these restaurants springing up in Brooklyn besides buzz? I mean, there's an international cachet that's happening if you have a restaurant in Brooklyn at this point. But in addition to buzz, why would you tell someone else to open in Brooklyn? Outside of just it being affordable per se, like what do you think are the draw besides just buzz?
One of the first things I think was I mean, especially for us, we got the opportunity to break the mold. There was an old guard, if you will, and there was a way to opening a restaurant when we did this. And I think when you moved outside to Brooklyn, it kind of opened up the platform for you to do it as you will. And I think it gave people a lot of opportunities to reimagine what a restaurant was to them. And I think Brooklyn gave that to a lot of people, where they got to say, this is how I feel about the hospitality industry, and this is what a restaurant is to me. And I think your voice kind of was silenced. That you kind of had to fit into that box in Manhattan, and there was just, it was so cost prohibitive to do business there that you had to make it financial. And I think there was a lot more artistry that got to happen in Brooklyn because you were free of some of that financial burden, and you really got to open something that you were passionate about and something that really meant something personal to you. And I think that was an opportunity that happened throughout Brooklyn that was really refreshing. And I think philosophically that carried on even as it got more expensive to do. I think people took this as an opportunity to say, I'm going to be innovative in this field, and I'm going to change the way that people perceive the restaurant business.
I think the three things, it's hard for me to give advice to anybody opening a restaurant because it's up to you what you want your path to be. But for me, the three things that I've really loved about Brooklyn, Williamsburg, Red Hook, these communities is, one, the diversity. The motto of Brooklyn is, in unity there is strength. And of course last week we all remember that we come on different boats, but now we're in the same boat together. And when I see what goes on in our restaurants every night, not just guests but the makeup of our teams, we're living that, and I'm really proud to be a part of that, and that excites me to continue doing it in Brooklyn, in the neighborhoods that we're doing it in. And number two, my family. Raising a family in Brooklyn has been an exciting thing that I never thought would ever be something that I was going to entertain. It was always about, moving back to the Jersey Shore where I grew up, and I had this cul-de-sac that I would play basketball and soccer with the older guys, and that's what I always had in my plan. But now I have this wonderful backyard of Domino Park and McCarran Park, and it's just been a really pleasant thing to see, especially at like 1:30 every afternoon. If you come to Missy, and you'll see a lineup of children that are literally looking into our pasta room like it's an aquarium. And but what's really incredible is at any moment of the day, you'll see a Hasidic family, a black family, a Latino family, and then my two boys who are, basically headbutting the window. And at 4 o'clock every day, we wipe this big glass pasta room window down because it's all the snot and the fingerprints of all these different kids. And for me, that is so exciting to be able to raise a family in this type of world that we live in. And it's there for you. And then the third thing I would just say, what I'm so proud about is to see that interaction of our team and guests, and there is no division. There's no separation. And I just don't think I would have been able to have all of those three things if, again, we opened in the West Village of Manhattan.
So in terms of opening in other places, you are in Miami with Hometown Barbecue.
No, I do not have a part in Miami.
You do not?
No.
Okay, just in New York.
That's Billy.
So you have Red Hook spaces, and you have Roberta's going into LA. How do you replicate in other areas that aren't the original space, the original thing that people love so much? How do you do that?
I just never looked at it as replication. For me, I've birthed these things, and they're children to me, and I nurture them. And the common line is their DNA, that they're raised by Carlo and I. And I think the best thing you can do is like give them a chance into the world. You put them out there, and you do all of the things that a good business does. You're like diligent on things, and you try to like create like cultural beats with them. But replication is a very difficult thing when it comes, especially a place like Roberta's. And I don't think we ever went into it being like, we want to replicate this all over. I think what we did was we wanted, one, to feed people high quality food, and that we were very passionate about. And for us, these were just more opportunities to feed people. And I think we looked at it that way always, that this was a new thing, this was a new child, and this child was gonna have characteristics of its own, and it was gonna grow up thinking its own way, but its common DNA was us.
And I think the only replication that we do is the process of finding those spaces. You know, Lilia was the 39th place that we looked at. It was the first place outside of Manhattan. Missy, we looked at 42 places before finding, you know, this great project of South Williamsburg. You know, we're on site 51 right now for number 3. Like, and I don't know, we don't have in our minds like a number. I think it's just that maniacal and methodical process, sticking to that formula that we believed in from the beginning, but also not ever wanting our spaces to feel like we're not there, and did not feel special like they do with Lily and Missy. That's probably the number one most important thing. It's you know, are our fingerprints all over that place?
I'm guilty of stopping and staring into the window, so I'm sure my fingerprints and hopefully not my snots are there.
How do you see, Alice, how do you see this continuing? Do you see it slowing down anytime soon, this like eternal desire for applicants to be in Brooklyn and be part of what is continuing to cement itself here?
Well, I think, no, I don't see it stopping, and no, I don't hope that it will stop either. I think it's a cycle, right? What you all have started is created opportunity for not just yourself for further growth, but also others to take the risk to find the space and to kind of build upon the foundation that's already there. Applicants, I think, in line of living healthier lifestyles, being more sustainable, we focus on career development and mentorship, and we look at career pathing. And the restaurant industry is really the feeder to the rest of the hospitality industry. I mean, there's different pillars, there's hotels, there's food service, and if you look at longevity in the industry, there's a lot of things that I think all of the leaders, you know, in the space are doing and really vocalizing to create better spaces for their staff and for their teams and for themselves, to promote, you know, creativity and growth. And I don't know if that was something that was so, you know, on the forefront 10, 15 years ago. It was a different time. We saw applicants thinking about their careers differently, even in the early stages. We're an 8-year young startup, I should say. And when we look at also, we fold in analytics and some AI into our applications to how do we help talent discover. They're clearly wanting to do things. You see the pattern of the types of jobs they apply to, where they apply to, where they want to relocate to, what category of businesses, maybe a particular chef or cuisine or something that they're following. And we feed that back to help them discover. You were doing these things in this neighborhood. What about these other things within that neighborhood? By the way, these are new openings. By the way, this is the type of cuisine that you said that you're really trying to learn or grow in. And as people start thinking about their careers differently, like what skills do I want to learn? I want to open my own restaurant one day. Who do I think has done it really well? Let me go work for them. People are being much more deliberate with where they want to work, who they want to work for, and what culture they want to grow in. And that's really inspiring to see.
Where are you seeing some of the growth outside of North Williamsburg and Bushwick? And is there room, to you guys, is there room for more growth? I mean, I feel like Williamsburg has so many restaurants. where is the room for continued growth, both in Williamsburg and Bushwick, and where do you see people choosing after Williamsburg and Bushwick? Where else are we growing?
Well, I'll say, because I'm a little once removed from specific neighborhoods, what we've seen in also other cities is that there are definitely, whether it's government initiated, there are definitely areas and pockets of areas that are under high development. In Boston, all by the water, and you see that almost forced in some areas where there's so much development going into an area, it loses a little bit of its soul, dare I say, and maybe the projects are driven by different priorities. I think in the Brooklyn area specifically, what I see and what I hope to continue to see is that in every major neighborhood, there's been a handful of pioneers, of folks who have kind of come in and defined it. And then they've been able to successfully not only create that vibe, that space, and their own mark, if you will, but they've been successful in moving to another part of Brooklyn or another area, another city. And still, I think what people really look for is, are you still true to your original spaces? Right? They don't want the original ones to be different now that you've grown past. You don't want to, dare I say, like
sell out.
Where do you see what's next, Sean and Brandon?
I mean, it's a hard one you battle with, but like I said, for us, it was always just like giving birth. Like you're just keep creating and you keep moving forward. But it's definitely something that you struggle with, selling out, right? And what that means. So what that meant on the first creation is always different in the second, and or like creating an album. It's like you can only make the music you can make, and it's hard to go back in time and recreate the things of your past. You're a younger, I wasn't nearly as smart. I'm not very smart now, but I wasn't nearly as smart then. So the things that you do, in the evolution of you as a person just start to change. It's hard. I struggle with it too. It's hard. You look back on these things sometimes. We talked earlier about having perspective. It's hard when you're in the midst of it. You're so caught up. Everything is all in all the time. And then sometimes when you get a chance to look back on these things, it could be both sad and like a very like warm feeling at the same time.
Sean?
I mean, we're still excited about Williamsburg, and there's still a lot of work to be done there, and we're definitely going to try and do that. But I'm also really excited about Sunset Park, Brownsville, East New York. This is where I want to spend my time in the next 15 and 20 years, because that's where the real opportunity is. We have 9 kids, 17-year-old kids, that work with us at Lilia and Missy, that come from those neighborhoods, that go to culinary high schools, that go to high school in Williamsburg. And I want those kids to be with us to open up their own places in their hometowns. And I think that is what this is going to be about, making those places better that they grew up in. And that's going to be the reality. So right now, we're going to keep on doing our thing in Williamsburg because the opportunity is still there to do it. But the potential to really push it and keep moving neighborhoods forward, I think there's just such a great chance to take advantage of.
Thank you, guys. I could keep doing this for another hour, but I'm already over and I'm going to get yelled at. So thank you so much, you guys. This has been a great panel.
Hi, everyone. So anyone who can go by just one name really doesn't need an introduction. We all know Drew. But as I do on my show, I like to give a little background of my guests before we get into talking. So let me tell you some of the things that Drew has accomplished. So Drew was a guest on my episode 176. He is one of America's most respected restaurateurs. Drew is the founder and inspiration behind Myriad Restaurant Group, which includes Tribeca Grill, Nobu 57, Nobu Downtown, Nobu London, Batard, the Porsche Grill at Citi Field, Daily Burger at Madison Square Garden, and crushed wine and spirits. Over the last 33 years, Marriott has opened and operated over 40 restaurants around the world, earning countless accolades, including opening Tribeca Grill with partner Robert De Niro to national acclaim, Drew's first restaurant, the groundbreaking Montrachet, which earned 3 stars from the New York Times and kept its rating for 21 years, and Petard, which also earned 3 New York Times stars, plus a Michelin star, and Best New Restaurant in America at the 2015 James Beard Awards. And Drew has also received James Beard Awards for Outstanding Restaurateur and Humanitarian of the Year. I could go on and on with your accolades, but Drew Nieporn, welcome to H.O.S.T.
Good morning, everybody.
So, always on my show, I always start out with my guests' backgrounds and how they got into the industry or their career. And we had covered a bit of, in the early days, you were exposed to restaurants, and you knew very early on that you wanted to be a restaurateur. But my question is, what drew you in?
Very interesting. Well, I grew up in New York City, Peter Cooper Village, which is the housing projects along the East River, 23rd Street to 20th Street. Great community. A lot of middle-class Jews there. And my mother was an actress in radio, and my father worked for the State Liquor Authority. So when we were kids, my father had a way of taking the application from the bottom of the pile to the top of the pile. So the restaurateurs would invite us to restaurants to eat on the arm, essentially, to eat. And I was exposed to this unbelievable number of restaurants. And these were people right off the boat. This was the 60s. And the food was very authentic and every kind of cuisine you can imagine. So at a very early age, my mother, who was very theatrical, I saw the restaurant business as being very theatrical. And my father was 16 years older than my mother, but he had a way of just endearing himself to these restaurateurs. They loved him. When we go out, I just absolutely adored the whole experience. And I knew that that was what I was going to do.
And you certainly have. And then you worked at McDonald's, you worked on cruise ships, Tavern on the Green, as well as more formal restaurants like the Las and the Lays, Le Perigord, and Le Grenouille. Am I saying it right?
Well, yeah.
So what would you say the biggest lesson learned from all these jobs? I mean, it's quite a mix.
Well, first of all, I'm happy to be here today because you've assembled a tremendous group of people. The panels this morning have been very interesting to me. A lot of people who are obviously very entrenched in what we do. But, I'm 64 now. I owned my first restaurant when I was 29. But I'm still interested. The reality is nothing supplants a professional experience, knowledge, and then the confidence in what you know. So at a very early age, I looked at the industry, and my father took us out to all these places. But so I was a student at Stuyvesant High School. I got into the Cornell School of Hotel Administration. When I was in high school, I worked at McDonald's. What does McDonald's teach you? It was unbelievable. McDonald's was one of the best experiences I've ever had in the industry because it basically taught you the simplicity of doing something right and clean and making money. When I was a student, I was 18 years old, and I was walking through the corridors of Cornell, and I saw a sign on a bulletin board looking for 6 students experienced in Russian service to sail to the following ports: Leningrad, Copenhagen, Stockholm, Oslo. I mean, a cruise ship, to work as a waiter. And guess what? I never ever worked in the dining room of a restaurant. I had never been a waiter, but I called the number. Are you experienced in Russian service? Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I am. So I get on the MS Vistafjord, 1974. I was 18 years old. They gave you a uniform, and I come into the dining room, and there's 60 waiters. The dining room is a football field, 600 passengers, and I'm wearing a blue shirt. Now, waiters don't wear blue shirts. I'm wearing a blue shirt. Waiters wear white shirts. And so I had 59 waiters laughing at me because they knew I was an imposter. Also, the way you carry the tray. You know, they're carrying the tray like this. I'm carrying the tray with two hands. And, you know, the kitchen's by escalator downstairs. Anyway, it was like riding a bicycle. 42-day cruise. You have the same customers. You work 7 days a week. You work breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Do you think you get some experience from that? Of course. So over the 4 years that I was a student at Cornell, I went back almost every Christmas cruise, almost every summer. Because why? I was traveling. You know, thank God I wasn't drafted into the military, but this was supplanting what that military experience would have brought. But more importantly, seeing 600 meals every day, 3 times a day, watching how that worked, that was a tremendous education. And, you know, when I graduated Cornell, you know, Cornell back then, miserable. It has the best reputation. Oh, we're the best. We are the best. Nobody goes into the restaurant business. Nobody. Because they're smart. But guess what? In the 70s, you could make money in the restaurant business. So, you know, Drew, what are you going to do? I'm going to open my own restaurant. Never did. I went to work at Tavern on the Green, which at that time was one of the most incredible places. And we'd, you know, served 1,500 people for brunch and 1,000 people for dinner. And then I got fed up, and I started to work in French restaurants, La Grenouille, Le Régence. I worked with Daniel Boulud in 1984 at the Plaza Athénée and Le Périgord. And when I'd bump into people who were my classmates, they said, well, when are you opening your own restaurants? And it just wasn't happening. But in 1983, I was in pretty good shape, and I ran the New York Marathon. And when I was jogging, I saw Lower Manhattan. And one day, business opportunities, New York Times, 1,500 square feet for $1,500 a month, Lower Manhattan. I ran down there, I took a look at it, and I said, I can do this. So I took, and then, by the way, all the people, when you decide what you're going to do, we'll invest. You go to those people and they don't invest. So I had absolutely no investors. I took $50,000 of my own money, $50,000 of a classmate's money, and Ronald Reagan was our president, and he was giving SBA loans, Small Business Administration loans, and with $150,000 on a sleepy block in Lower Manhattan, Tribeca, just like going to Brooklyn now, I guess.
I was going to say, it's just the changing neighborhoods
it's ridiculous. But anyway, I opened this place with a little-known chef named David Boulay. And he was a pain in the ass. I mean, it was unbelievable. But, I mean, his food was unbelievable. I mean, this is 35 years ago. And that food is as good as anybody's cooking today. And anyway, 7 weeks after we opened, we got 3 stars from the New York Times. And let me explain something. It doesn't matter. All of you restaurateurs, chefs in the audience, nothing will ever surpass that moment. It was an out-of-body experience. Why? I was charging $16 for 3 courses. 1.6. So the phone never stopped ringing. Literally, you could not get up to go to the toilet. The phone never stopped ringing, and that restaurant, Montrachet, went 22 years.
It's
so it
amazing.
was amazing. And then just the one thing, Shari, is that, that restaurant, we have a restaurant called Cortone that took place after that in the same space.
Heard of it.
And I took out 30 seats. I moved the kitchen all the way to the back. I created the most unbelievable 60-seat restaurant for another great chef, Paulie Brandt. And we got 3 stars again. And we got 2 Michelin stars. The only thing we didn't have were customers. We had no customers. And then, I had to close. But 5 years with Paulie Brandt was like 100 dog years. But he moved to Brooklyn. That worked out really well. But anyway, And then we opened Batard, which again got 3 stars. Marcus Clark is a wonderful human being, and we're still there. And now the total sum of the years is 35 years. So it's pretty amazing.
Yes, certainly, extremely amazing. So how do you, I mean, you went on to open 40 restaurants in 32 years. How do you decide, I guess, what you want to do, and how has consumer trends or over the years changed maybe your decisions?
It's really not consumer trends. You know, I grew up in Joe Baum, Restaurant Associates, Windows on the World, Rainbow Room. They were constantly creating concepts. You know, New York, I had worked in a lot of restaurants. And probably the most important reason for my success was how poorly I saw how restaurants were run, how poorly they treated their help. And so I just was like, I'm going to do this better. I'm going to raise the bar, and better food, better service, be nice. I have no enemies, except Rita Germain. But I have no enemies. When I think back on my career, I sometimes think like, well, how come I haven't been sued or got caught up in the Me Too or any of this stuff? And I guess, you know, that's the theory. But let me explain that when I was doing this, what I feel most amazing about was you could make money in the restaurant business. And I'm not sure you can make money in the restaurant business now unless you're Roberta Zamisi, because those are incredible. Look, in 1994, you know, keep in mind, Robert De Niro, I opened Tribeca Grill in 1990. We didn't get the 3 stars, but we're there 30 years. This year is 30 years. And then Robert De Niro, in a moment of terrible casting, introduces me to Nobu Matsuisa to be the chef at Tribeca Grill. I was like, we're not opening a Japanese restaurant. But I saw that friendship between De Niro and Nobu. And in 1994, we opened Nobu in Tribeca. And guess what? 25 years later, there are 50 Nobus around the world. There's Nobu under a manhole cover.
And
I mean, it's unbelievable.
I've been to the one in Doha.
She's been, I have never been.
Last year, on my way back from Bali, I had a layover, and
You've been there.
I think back, did that really happen? But yes, I had your black cod lettuce wraps around the world. It was
See,
pretty amazing.
Let me explain that. When we set out, we were going to reinvent the wheel. You know, the chicken dish that was served, you know, down the block, we couldn't serve that chicken dish. And, you know, there were so many similarities in the French restaurants. The French dominated everything. We were all, like, inspired by the French restaurants. But basically, we were trying to be creative, and we were trying to refine food. And the journalists at that time, there were a handful that sort of elevated you. JJ said something he was wrong about. The media is essential. If you're in Harlem, in the middle of no place, you need somebody to talk about you. I was in Tribeca. We needed people to talk about us. I lived it. I felt it. And in each case, it's not that you play to the media, but I'm in Tribeca. And let me explain something. As much as I heard Sean talk about his community, Tribeca has never supported us. If we weren't destination, and how do you become destination? You have to be that good. You have to offer something to people that's that good. But it wasn't about the brand. It was about doing different things. So I was opening Centrico with Aaron Sanchez. I was opening Leila, a Middle Eastern restaurant. I went to San Francisco. It's like a communist country, San Francisco. I was there for 14 years. I didn't make $1, but I smoked a lot of weed. But no, but 14 years I was in the wine country. Stuart Brioza, our last chef, has State Bird Provisions, probably the most famous restaurant in San Francisco this day. So I was living out my dream to actualize and to do all these different things. And meanwhile, I didn't even realize that if he just did 50 Nobus, that was the way to make money in the restaurant business.
So what's your advice for future restaurateurs?
Stay out. Don't do it. No, I mean, I feel very bad because, you know, this was, you have to understand, I paid $12 a foot. Somebody asked me, they said, how much is a square foot in New York? I said, start with 100 and go up. I paid $12. You know, I sat with my father in restaurants where we were the only ones. And the owner would cook in the day and work the floor at night, and there'd be like no customers, but they could stay in business because the rent was like $50 a day. I mean, when I opened Morrichet, my rent was $1,500. That's $50 a day. Today, you know, like, and you're all young people, but you know, they say, well, the rent's going to be $500,000. And like the numbers don't lie. So whatever you do, if you think you want to be in the restaurant business and you want to build a restaurant for at a minimum $1 million plus, and then you want to pay $300 to $500, God knows how much more. It's just the numbers don't lie. So sit down and work the numbers. And if the numbers tell you that this thing ain't going to make a buck, it ain't going to make a buck. We made money 3 ways. Labor was cheap, food was cheap, rent was cheap. Guess what, everybody? None of that's cheap anymore. So the smartest guy is John George von Gerichten. Because if you read these articles in the New York Times, what does John George do? He gets paid. 5% of gross, 7% of gross, 10% of gross. Steve Wynn came to us, said, I'm going to open a place called the Bellagio. I'll pay you 5% of gross. A lot of people made that deal. Guess what? They don't make that deal anymore. They don't want to pay you. They want the real estate people. I'm sorry if there are people in the audience that are real estate people, and I'm sure there are, but the real estate people want to get the motherfucking money out of your pockets. That's all they care about. And, you know, they used to say to me, market rent is now $70 a foot. I said, why? Oh, because the guy across the street is paying that. So the biggest schmuck who pays the highest rent now sets the bar that we're all supposed to be schmucks like that.
So
I don't get it, but
the future part of this panel. Do you plan to
Oh, the
open?
future.
Do you plan to open more restaurants? Would you like to? And what would they be?
Well, first of all, a few years ago, I used to say I would have had 40 more restaurants if the rent was more reasonable. I don't even make that comment anymore. I mean, I have dozens of ideas. Who amongst you can say they're in Madison Square Garden every day making hamburgers for over 1,000 people a night after working at a McDonald's? And by the way, when Madison Square Garden said, you're going to do the hamburgers, I said, no way. I don't want to make a hamburger. Danny Meyer, the king of the hamburger. I don't want to compete with that. But then they called me back and they said, yeah, you're going to make hamburgers. So I said, well, I'm going to think this through, and I broke it down. And by the way, I'm not a chef. I'm a restaurateur. Did you hear that sound just now? Dinosaur? So because like the chefs don't listen to us anymore. But the reality is quality, and not just you thinking it's quality. It's got to be delicious. It's got to be sensational. It's got to be different. And everything that we've done. And in the future, you know, like if somebody presents something, there are young people who've come to me and they've said, I want to do this, I want to do that. Nothing supplants talent. And talent is, the people who are the most talented, they're very, very few. And the problem right now is that, because everything's gone up in price, is that, you know, for instance, fine dining is out the window. Unless you want to pay $350 at 11 Madison Park. I mean, $350? It's crazy. It's crazy what people have to charge now. So the future for me is, you know, we used to joke. Marty and I are partners. Marty Shapiro and I are partners for 30 years. Grace Ann talked about Will Guidara and Daniel Humm. I couldn't believe that relationship. I was so enthralled with that relationship because at the Welcome Conference, Daniel Humm would get up there and he would tell the front of the house people how important you are. was like, this is unbelievable. And then it fell apart. And we don't know why. We're part of this 30 years. That's more important to me than opening a new restaurant. 30 years, it's most important that you're custodial and you take care of the staff that have been loyal to you. You have to reciprocate.
Yeah, it's impressive.
We have 3 minutes and 37 seconds.
All right. Well, I want to. We have to. We're going to play my speed round, but that's going to.
But I want to tell you, I did Shari's radio thing, and I just had a stroke. I had a stroke 2 years ago, and it went very well. But it was literally right after the stroke, so I didn't know how much I would, be able to, how lucid I would be. And then she asked me one question, and I swear to God, it's just like totally blanked. So I hope I don't blank on these questions.
I didn't even notice.
Yeah.
Before we play the speed round, just the overall theme of this conference is all in.
Right. I'm all in.
Okay.
Did you notice?
Perfect. Short answer. That's what I wanted. Okay.
I'm all in.
You're all in.
Totally.
I was going to say what it means to you, but you're just
No,
all in.
I immersed myself in the industry. I pretty much actualized a lot of my dreams, and now I'm at a stage in my life where I look back on it, and I'm happy to have what I have. Look, Nobu is the most successful single entity probably in the history of restaurants. I mean, it's ridiculous. Last night, 500 covers up on 57th Street, 500 covers downtown, $100 average check. That's $100,000 every day. Nothing supplants that. You're not going to do better.
It's a fabulous restaurant. It's done well.
Yeah.
Okay, so on my show, I play a speed round game where I ask my guests, I give them a choice between two things, either or, and they get to pick their preference. I have 5 new ones for you because I wasn't going to make this so easy.
I'll be fast.
So there's no right or wrong, but you just pick your preference. Okay, so here we go. Big Mac or Whopper?
Whopper.
I don't know. I thought you were
No, I
going the other way.
like the Impossible Whopper. By the way.
Okay. Working the dining room floor or being a guest in the dining room?
Working the dining room floor.
Mets or Yankees?
Both. No, just real quick. I have a restaurant at Citi Field.
Yeah.
Because my brother is a sick Mets fan. But obviously, I love the Yankees.
The Godfather 2, Goodfellas, or The Irishman?
Oh, my God. Godfather 2. You talking to me?
Last one is...
I don't think I've... Have you finished watching The Irishman? I'm still...
I haven't started. I haven't started. I've been preparing for a conference.
When he's kicking the guy, he looks like a 90-year-old person kicking the... That's what I saw, anyway. By the way, Robert De Niro puts all his friends in movies except me. I'm the only person who's never been... But I was in a movie called Eat This New York, which in 2004 talked about how stupid people from Minneapolis decided to open a restaurant in Brooklyn. That was the whole documentary. And then they went to Danny Meyer and Daniel Boulud and me to tell them how stupid they were.
Last one, buffet or family-style lunch?
Well, I used to like all you could eat, but I'll say family-style lunch.
That's the game. That's our segue into lunch that we're going to be having soon.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for tuning into this special episode of All in the Industry on Heritage Radio Network, covering H.O.S.T Summit Plus Social, which took place on Monday, January 27th, 2020, at the William Vale in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Many thanks to my fabulous team, our fantastic panelists and partners, and everyone who joined us for our live event. It was truly a special day. Thanks to the Heritage Radio Network team for their amazing support, including Katie Mossman-Wadler, Kat Johnson, Hannah Forden, Dylan Hewer, and Amanda Wang. For more information about H.O.S.T, please go to allintheindustry.com and stay tuned for our upcoming video coverage from the event. On social media, follow me at Shari Bayer at Bayer PR and at All Industry Our hashtag is Host Summit Social and Host 2020. Check out my Facebook page at All in the Industry and other websites, BayerPublicRelations.com and ShariBayer.com. All of our shows are archived at heritageradionetwork.org. We are also on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Next week, we will have part 2 of our host coverage. I hope you'll tune in then. I'm Shari Bayer. Thank you for being part of All in the Industry. Bye. All in the Industry is powered by Simplecast. I'm Shari Bayer, and you're listening to Heritage Radio Network, a member-supported podcast network broadcasting over 35 weekly shows live from Bushwick, Brooklyn. This year, HRN is celebrating 10 years of food radio. For the past decade, we've been taking you behind the scenes of farms, restaurants, breweries, school cafeterias, and more. It's been 10 years, and we're just getting started. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.